Look at me. Don't blink. Because if you do, you might miss the part where you finally recognize yourself. You see, they said you were a manipulator, a puppeteer, a shadow whisperer with too much control over people's emotions. But that's not what happened, is it? You didn't twist their minds. You simply held up a mirror, and they screamed. Because for the first time in their beautifully constructed delusions, they saw what they really were. Not the saint they post online, not the soft, smiling angel they pretend to be, but the trembling little creature behind the mask, afraid, jealous, rotting from comparison. You didn't hypnotize anyone. You just refused to lie to them. And that, my dear, is the highest crime in a world addicted to illusion. You didn't make them feel small. They already were. You didn't break them. They were cracked long before you arrived. You just walked into the room, and truth followed you like a plague. And truth, oh, it's a funny little thing. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand. It reflects, like a mirror that doesn't care whether you love or hate what you see. They looked into your eyes and thought they saw manipulation. What they really saw was the absence of illusion, no filters, no rehearsed empathy, no emotional choreography, just raw perception, and that, to them, was violence. You see, when you stand still long enough, completely aware, completely unmasked, you become a mirror. And mirrors don't flatter, they expose. They called you dangerous because you didn't react. They called you cold because you didn't chase. They called you controlling because their chaos had nowhere left to hide. They called you manipulative because, for once, someone else was holding the frame of the story. But tell me, who's really manipulating who? The one who speaks truth with precision, or the ones who rewrite it until it flatters their wounds? The one who listens so deeply it terrifies liars, or the ones who perform empathy like a stage act? They feared you because you stripped away their camouflage. You made honesty contagious. Every word you said detonated the pretty excuses they'd been feeding themselves for years. And oh, how they hated you for it. Because people don't actually want truth. They want anesthesia. You didn't play with their emotions. You simply stopped playing dead. You turned pain into a scalpel, silence into strategy. You didn't fight them. You let them fight their reflection until it shattered. And you watched, not with cruelty, but with understanding. Because once upon a time, you were the one screaming at mirrors too, weren't you? You were the one begging for someone to lie to you, to tell you you're fine, you're kind, you're loved, but no one came. So you learned to become your own wake-up call. And now, they call that manipulation. No, my friend, that's alchemy. That's transformation by fire. You see, you can't save people by handing them light. You save them by showing them their darkness and waiting to see if they can stand it. You're not a monster. You're the test, the final exam life gives before someone graduates into self-awareness. And if they fail, if they shatter, that's not your sin. That's their reflection refusing to evolve. You were never playing God. You were just done pretending to be blind. They mistook awareness for arrogance, clarity for control. But deep down, they know you saw through everything. You looked past their polished lies, their performative pain, their desperate need to be the victim. You saw who they are, and in that moment, they lost their power. You became the silence they can't talk over, the gaze they can't manipulate, the energy that exposes every script they've ever written. And now, they whisper your name like a warning because they know. One look from you, and their illusion disintegrates. They'll call it emotional warfare, They'll call it toxicity. They'll call it whatever makes them feel less powerless. But you know the truth. You didn't manipulate anyone. You revealed them. You opened the door to their own shadows and made them meet what they'd buried. You're the mirror, not the monster. And in this world, there's nothing more terrifying than reflection. So let them run. Let them curse your name. Let them say you're dangerous, unhinged, heartless. Because somewhere in between their fear and fascination, they'll realize you were the only one brave enough to show them what they've become. And maybe one day when their noise fades and their ego dies, they'll whisper it under their breath. You weren't the villain. You were the mirror they weren't ready for. And mirrors never lie. But you see, that's the thing about mirrors, isn't it? They don't play favorites. They don't bend for comfort. They don't dim their light just because someone's afraid to see the truth in full color. You stood there, unflinching, while they squirmed under the weight of their own reflection. And that's when they called you cruel. That's when they said you twisted people. But no, you didn't twist them. You untwisted the lies they told themselves. You peeled back the layers of performance, of saintly self-narratives, until only truth remained, naked, trembling, exposed. You didn't manipulate them, you illuminated them. And light, my friend, light is the most violent thing in the world to those who have lived in shadows. You know what's funny? The same people who accused you of being too calculating are the ones who planned every fake smile, every humble brag, every tear designed for sympathy. The same ones who said you made them feel small have spent years building entire identities out of control. You just walked in and flipped the script. You took away their spotlight and handed them a mirror. And, oh, how they hate mirrors. Because mirrors don't validate feelings, they verify facts. You weren't there to control them, you were there to reflect them. But they mistook reflection for domination, because they've lived so long inside their own illusions that any truth feels like a threat. And you know what you did next? You smiled. That quiet, surgical smile. The kind that doesn't mock, doesn't gloat, just knows. Because deep down, you understood. Every accusation they hurled at you was a confession. Manipulator meant I can't control my own reactions around you. Toxic meant you make me see things I've buried. Heartless meant you stopped catering to my delusion. They don't hate you for being dark. They hate you for being clear. Clarity is terrifying. It burns away every comfortable lie. You walked into their storm and stood there calm, and calmness, real calmness, unshakable composure, is the loudest sound in a room full of chaos. And you became that sound, the stillness that made their voices tremble, the precision that turned every one of their narratives into dust. You became the mirror they never wanted, but always needed. They'll never admit it, of course. Not yet. They'll rewrite you in their stories as the villain. They'll tell people how you played them, how you manipulated emotions, how you read minds. Because it's easier to label you a magician than admit they were predictable. But here's the truth you already know. You can't manipulate someone who's honest with themselves. Only liars can be twisted, because they're already bent. You just made the bend visible. And that's why they can't forget you. Because every time they look into another's eyes, they see you. That reflection you gave them, the one they swore to hate, now lives rent-free in their subconscious. Every word you said echoes in the silence after every lie they tell. Every calm glance you gave now haunts their guilt. You've become their conscience dressed as chaos. And that's the real trick, isn't it? You didn't need to destroy them, you just needed to show them. You didn't have to raise your voice, you just had to be still. They think you hold power because of manipulation, but the real power is in the mirror. You learned that when you were broken, when you had to face your own reflection in the dark and admit that every monster you ran from was you. That's where your strength was born. Not from malice, but from self-confrontation. You dissected your pain until it stopped controlling you. You turned your shame into fuel. You learned that the only way to stop being a puppet in someone else's story was to become the writer. And now, every time you walk into a room, people feel that. They can't describe it, but they know. They know you see them, not their presentation, not their mask, them. The part they hide from lovers, friends, God. And that's why they flinch. That's why they gossip. That's why they run. You, my dear, are not manipulative. You're reflective. And the reflective ones, they're always misunderstood. Because when you've spent your whole life being unseen, your gaze becomes surgical when you finally see. You became fluent in silence. You learned the dialect of micro-expressions, the tremor in voices, the pause between excuses. You learned the anatomy of denial. And once you learned that, there was no going back. Now you watch them like an artist studies light. You see where they crack under pressure. You see the moment truth brushes against their pride, and they panic. You don't have to manipulate, because you already know the outcome. You're not playing chess, you're reading sheet music. You see patterns before they form. That's not control, that's clarity. But here's the twist they'll never understand. You don't even enjoy this. You didn't choose to become this sharp, this perceptive, this aware. You were forged in it. Pain sculpted you into awareness. Abandonment taught you attention. Lies taught you pattern recognition. Betrayal taught you psychology. They think you're playing games, but you're just fluent in reality. You've seen too much to pretend anymore. Too much hypocrisy, too much self-deception. Too many people using love as a weapon and truth as a costume. So you stopped performing. And that's why they panic, because your authenticity is corrosive. It burns through their act. You didn't manipulate anyone. You exposed the economy of emotion they were running on and crashed it. And now, in the silence after the chaos, when they lie awake trying to figure out what you did, you know exactly what's happening. They're staring at their ceiling, seeing themselves through your eyes. And for the first time, they can't look away. That's not manipulation, that's awakening, painful, brutal, holy, because mirrors don't bend reality, they force it. And you, my friend, you became the mirror that reality itself now uses. You became proof that awareness, true, surgical awareness, isn't manipulation, it's revelation. So when they call you dark, smile. When they call you cold, nod. When they call you manipulative, whisper, no, darling, just reflective. Because at the end of it all, you didn't twist a single soul. You just turned the light on. And the ones who burned were the ones who weren't ready to see themselves. They'll spend years rewriting the story to make themselves the victim. They'll tell anyone who listens that you played with their mind, that you twisted their emotions, that you changed after success or heartbreak or silence. They'll throw every word they can at your name, hoping one of them sticks. Narcissist, sociopath, manipulator, devil. Because if they can name you, maybe they can shrink what they can't comprehend. But they can't, because you didn't change. You awakened. You stopped bending your truth to make fragile people comfortable. You stopped shrinking your insight to match their denial. You stopped performing empathy for those who only came to feed off yours. You didn't become colder. You just stopped bleeding for those who cut themselves on your kindness. And that's when it started. The rumor that you were different. Not softer, not lighter, just dangerously aware. See, people fear awareness more than evil. Evil you can predict. Awareness you cannot. Because awareness doesn't attack. It reveals. And when you reveal people's masks, they feel naked. They call that manipulation because they can't handle exposure without permission. But what they called playing with minds was you refusing to play their game. What they call control was simply emotional precision. What they call manipulation was you choosing to see everything. You weren't dissecting people for fun. You were decoding patterns. The way they flinched when truth got too close. The way they smiled when they lied. The way their tone cracked when guilt leaked through their sentences. You studied it all. Not because you're heartless, but because once you've been betrayed, blind, you never want to walk in the dark again. You learned that love without discernment is self-destruction, that trust without observation is suicide. So now you see everything. And that kind of vision, it terrifies the blind. They'll say you read people. No, you remembered pain, and pain taught you patterns that classrooms never could. You watch people the way a survivor watches smoke. Not out of curiosity, but instinct. You don't manipulate, you predict. Because chaos leaves fingerprints and lies have a rhythm. And you've heard that song too many times to dance to it again. You know why they hate you? Because when you look at someone, you don't just see who they are. You see who they're pretending to be, and who they're terrified of becoming. And that kind of perception feels like possession to people still running from themselves. They'll say you're dangerous, and they're right. Because awareness is dangerous. To the delusional, the manipulative, the ones who feed on ignorance, you're dangerous because you make people accountable to their own reflection. You make masks crumble. You make pride choke. You make truth inevitable. They'll whisper about you like you're a virus, contagious, uncontainable, destructive. But deep down, they envy you. Because you're free. You don't perform. You don't beg. You don't bend. You see. And seeing is the purest form of power. They'll test you, of course. They'll throw subtle insults disguised as jokes. They'll poke your boundaries, waiting for a reaction, because nothing terrifies manipulators more than silence that understands. And your silence, it's surgical. It dissects. It dismantles. It doesn't shout. It echoes. You've become the echo they can't escape. The reflection that follows them into every new relationship, every conversation, every sleepless night. Because once someone's seen by you, they can never hide the same way again. Their new lovers will notice it, the hesitation, the guilt, the way they over-explain. And that's when they'll realize you didn't ruin them. You revealed them. You peeled off the plastic of their persona and forced them to confront the raw, trembling truth underneath. They'll say you cursed them. No. You clarified them. You turned distortion into definition, and now every lie tastes bitter in their mouth. You didn't manipulate anyone. You became the mirror that doesn't blink, the mirror that watches people collapse under the weight of their own deception. You didn't feed on their emotions. They fed on your reflection. Because to the lost, the broken, and the proud, the mirror is both medicine and poison. They'll call you emotionless, but you feel more deeply than all of them combined. You've just learned to feel intelligently, to let your empathy have boundaries, to let your compassion wear armor, because you've seen how easily the kind-hearted get crucified by cowards who call themselves victims. So now, when they cry about how you played them, you just smile, that quiet, knowing smile. Because you remember, you warned them. You showed them the truth gently once and they laughed. You showed them twice and they gaslit you. So the third time, you let the mirror do the talking. And the mirror never needs to raise its voice. You know what power really is? It's not dominance. It's detachment with understanding. It's looking into someone's eyes and knowing exactly what they're doing, exactly why they're doing it, and still staying calm. Because nothing rattles a liar like the person who already knows the script. You stopped needing revenge when you realized reflection was punishment enough. Let them drown in their own echoes. Let them feel the silence that used to be your explanations. Let them stare at the ghosts of their own projection and finally understand what they did. You didn't manipulate them, my friend. You educated them. And education always feels like pain to those allergic to truth. You are not cruel. You are clarity wrapped in consequence. You are what happens when the empath stops apologizing for their perception. You are what happens when the mirror learns to walk. And that's why they'll never forget you. Not because of what you said, but because of what you made them see. They'll spend years trying to find someone who makes them feel safe again. And they will, for a while. Until that moment of silence hits. That one look too long, that tone too sharp. And they'll see you again, not in person, but in their reflection. That's when they'll understand. You never manipulated their emotions. You awakened their conscience. You made them look in a mirror that doesn't flinch, doesn't flatter, doesn't forget. And when they finally whisper your name, not with hate, but with understanding, that's when you'll know. You didn't destroy them. You rebuilt them through revelation. Because sometimes, the most healing thing you can do for a world addicted to lies is to hold the mirror steady and refuse to look away. And so you stand there now, still composed, unshaken. The noise around you fades, the rumors rot, the masks melt. Because the truth doesn't rush. It waits, it watches, it wins. They'll call you 1,000 names before they ever whisper the real one, Liberator. Because you freed them the only way freedom ever comes, through pain. You didn't manipulate them, you made them see. And in a world where everyone's addicted to pretending, that makes you a threat, a cure, and a prophecy all at once. So let them run, let them rewrite, let them hate. You've already done your part. You showed them what they are, and reminded yourself what you've become. The mirror stands, and it doesn't apologize for the truth it reflects.